day of the war, Iran demonstrated its response. Tehran delivered strikes with ballistic missiles on civilian objects in different cities of Israel. Almost everything was intercepted by an iron dome, but several units of the ballistics still broke through the air defense system. As a result, 4 people were killed and dozens were injured. This means that Iran did not accept the Israeli ultimatum, and now its military fuel infrastructure will be completely destroyed. Details in a minute. Ukraine continues to strike on Russian enterprises. Last night, one was hit in the Stavropol region, another in the Samara region. Also, details about the previous strikes in Kyiv have become known. The Soviet Union was able to open a Russian column of military personnel from 4 buses. Apparently, they covered them with cassettes of JMLRS released from HIMARS. According to preliminary data, dozens of Russian soldiers were killed. Russian Su-25 crashed, either due to friendly fire or the repairman did not see the breakdown, but the plane just fell apart in the air, and this got on video. About this and much more in today's fresh report, which you can support with your like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. All these actions help promote the video, especially your subscriptions. They are important for YouTube algorithms. I continue to be a little on a trip, so sorry again for the color of the image, the quality, and all that. Well, I do what I can. You can support the channel financially on Patreon. The link is in the description, or by buying NVPN. This is a means for bypassing blockages, which allows you to bypass YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram in the near future, obviously, but also blocked Russian media. The state should not decide what to watch, listen, or read. You should do it yourself, and NVPN allows you to do it. You can buy it by the link in the description. This is legal in Russia. Purchase and use of NVPN are not prohibited. But we move on to what happened in the past 24 hours in Ukraine, and not only. Tension of conflict between Israel and Iran does not think to weaken. On the second day of the operation, Israeli planes and even drones operate in the Iranian sky. The PVO of the Islamic regime is destroyed or suppressed. Despite a bunch of fakes, not a single confirmed loss of an Israeli plane has been recorded at the time of the preparation of the report. Hits continue on the objects of Iran's nuclear missile program. The regime tried to strike back with hundreds of Shaheeds, which, by the way, even in the Russian-Ukrainian war looked ridiculous, and of course none of them flew. This was followed by several waves of ballistic missiles. According to Iran, they were aimed at military nuclear objects of Israel. However, Iran lies always even more evil than Konashenko. Remember, by the way, where he disappeared. It's interesting. Several missiles broke through the Iron Dome. There were a couple of flights to Tel Aviv and other cities. As a result, from the branch of Iran, there are 4 dead and dozens of injured. Most of them are easily wounded, but still the lives of 4 people Iran took away, and some of the injured remain in a serious state of average weight, but mostly all are easily wounded. Nevertheless, the shots of the flights in the city buildings, in my opinion, once again confirmed the reason for the actions of Israel. Yes, it looks like his country broke through only a few missiles, but just imagine if at least one of them seemed nuclear. In the evening, during the shelling, Iranian media posted a bunch of fakes caught by both trash media and sometimes relatively decent ones about the attacks on the nuclear object of Israel, the destruction of military bases, even about knocking down Israeli planes, which is generally some kind of nonsense since the information appeared during the missile strike of Iran. What could the Israeli plane do to Iran? $1 million question. In short, pretty quickly as always, it turned out that this is all lipo, and many of the people who claim to be successful in defeating Tehran are just old frames. They even managed to launch Russian calibers from submarine boats in 2022. Hey for Tehran's strike on Israel. However, despite the fact that the answer of Iran is difficult to call destructive for Israel, it was a red line for Jerusalem. Instead of strikes in the desert, which would mean that Iran is not going to escalate, but will go to a reasonable action in its position. Struck cities. This means that in the coming days Iran will be destroyed. At least its military facilities will be destroyed, as well as its fuel and energy facilities will be attacked, to my regret. Because I hope that Iran would still act reasonably, agree to the ultimatum of Israel, abandon nuclear and missile programs, and accordingly, sign a deal with the United States, which will lead to the fact that sanctions will be lifted from Iran and Iranian oil will flow into the world market, falling prices on it, which in turn will hit Russia quite seriously. Unfortunately, Iran has gone the way that is not clear what to expect. Well, that is the way of complete self-destruction. Therefore, yes, I think that in the near future the Iranian nuclear power plants will be destroyed, which will cause a crisis inside the country itself. But this is their choice. Meanwhile, Donald Trump apparently decided to take advantage of the moment and play a good cop. He said that he gave Iran a chance by chance to conclude a deal and urged Iran to do so until it was too late. The US president wrote about this on his social network True Social. I gave Iran a chance by chance to conclude a deal. I asked them in the strongest expressions just to do it, but no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they were to it, they just could not do it. Trump said that the US is producing the best deadly military equipment in the world, adding that Israel has a lot of it and does not know how to use it. Some Iranian supporters of the tough line said boldly, but they did not know what was going to happen. Now they are all dead and then it will only get worse, it is said in the Post. Trump urged Iran to conclude a nuclear deal until it was too late. The problem here is that Israel has clearly taken its place at the negotiating table with its actions. No deal will make sense if Israel is not satisfied with its content and does not agree to stop the attacks, and for this, the Iranian regime will have to make much more serious concessions. At the same time, it is possible. A scenario in which Israel will take a course in destabilizing the destruction of the Iranian regime by strikes by the political leadership of the infrastructure object, and then there can be no deal. Actually, Iran yesterday evening made this plan almost the only one. My regret again, personally, I would prefer that Iran did not respond to the attack yesterday, but agreed to the option of a deal that Israel would build. This would lead to the preservation of life in Iran and to removing the sanctions, which means the cooperative sale of oil. But alas, the rocket pate levy. Let's not have such a scenario. Now Israel will dismantle the atoll regime entirely. We will talk more about this whole situation, I hope, already today, since there are players involved in it, including those who actively participate in the war in Ukraine. America is clear. Iran is an ally of Russia, which supplies artillery, ammunition, UAVs, and missiles. Putin, who was Trump's hope for influence on Iran. Well, Israel is an active recipient of American weapons and missiles for air defense, as well as American bases in the region. So yes, this war is certainly important in itself and affects the region, that is, the Middle East, and affects the world in general, and on the developments that exist in connection with the war in Ukraine, including. So you and I think we'll talk about this separately today. In the meantime, another Trump deal will fall apart. Ukraine is not interested in continuing negotiations with Russia if there is no subject conversation about the ceasefire. This was stated by the head of the Foreign Ministry of Ukraine, Andrei Sybiha. Trump's last plan, let him try to agree on his own, did not work because Russia, let me remind you, brought to Istanbul requirements that were unfulfilled in 1922 when Russian troops were under Kyiv, adding to them the recognition of the annexation of the 4 regions of Ukraine, none of which the OSRF does not completely control. Apparently, Trump forgot the advice of one of his predecessors, Tadeusz Roosevelt, who loved to repeat, speak softly, but hold a big club in your hands and you will go far. And in times of Roosevelt and now, many outraged world leaders do not take any words if they do not see in the opponent's hands that very big club and do not feel ready to use it, that he is ready to use it according to its purpose, but perhaps in some way. What is happening in Iran will demonstrate that Trump, in principle, does not only play the peacemaker, but is able to at least sanction quite serious actions. Another slightly more pleasant international news: the mercenaries of the Russian African Corps were ambushed by the insurgents of Azovada in the north of Mali. This was reported by the project War Noir in its post on Twitter. The ambush took place in the area of the Tuareg city of Keita with the use of Belgian anti-tank mines PRB M3A1. As part of the attack on the column, there were insurgents of the armed forces of Mali and Russian mercenaries from the African Corps, which recently replaced the Wagnerians in this country. According to the information of the project LCI Africa, as a result of the explosion of mines, 4 Russian mercenaries were killed, 3 more were injured. Only the truck with an empty trailer for transporting equipment can be seen on the published photos. Given the stated number of dead and wounded, there was probably another technique as part of the column. As a result, photos of the dead appeared on the network. In general, it is clear that Africa is certainly not Ukraine, but to sell in resort conditions, Russian soldiers will not come out here. This must be said that some of the channels have reported that the photos are supposedly old, but the search for them did not allow me to confirm this. If you closely monitor the region and what is happening there, write in the comments. Well, now let's move on to the Ukrainian blow. At night, the BPA attacked a chemical company Nevonomysky Azot in the Stavropol Territory. The locals published footage from the BPA. Later, Governor Vladimir Vladimirov confirmed the attack. The fall of debris in the Nevonomysky industrial zone was recorded. At first he reported about 1 victim, but later clarified that there were no victims. According to open sources, Nevonomysky Azot is one of the largest producers of nitrogen fertilizers in Russia. At the end of May, in the Tula region, another enterprise with the same name Azot was attacked. 2 plants, Everkima and Nevonomysky Azot and Novomoskovsky Azot were sent to the Sverdlov plant in Dzerzhinsk, Nizhny Novgorod region. At least 38,000 tons of hydrochloric acid and almost 5,000 tons of azot acid. According to Reiter, this substance is used for the production of octogen and hexogen, which in turn are used in artillery shells. Also, UAVs attacked an enterprise in the Samara region. According to Ukrainian channels, either the UAV Navokaibish catalyst plant or the UAV Navokaibish oil and chemical company could be under attack. Information is now clarified. Governor of the Samara region, Vyacheslav Fedorashev, confirmed the fact of an attack on on the region. Tonight, an attempt was made to attack one of the industrial enterprises of Novokhybersk. There are no damage or victims. Novokhybersk catalyst plant is engaged in the regeneration of catalysts and the production of new types of catalysts and absorbents. The plant supports oil processing and the chemical industry, providing the quality of fuel and materials. In turn, the Novokhybersk Oil and Chemical Company specializes in the production of fissured hydrocarbons like MT, metitrit, amyl ether, benzyl phenol, acetone, alpha-methylstyrol alafene, paratrate butyl phenol, and is also the only manufacturer of synthetic ethanol in the country. So, another blow to Russian enterprises which are somehow connected with the defense industry is a good and correct strategy. It is necessary to hit vulnerable places, and these places are still vulnerable, and Ukraine continues to hit them. And rightly so. You could see the video that I released about how the Zetniks are very dissatisfied with this and the fact that Russia cannot ensure the safety of these enterprises. Nevertheless, these blows should become more while Ukraine goes out to increase their number and quality of the depth of these blows. Well, I will remind you that the main basis of Ukrainian defense against the fascist occupation army of Russia, which wants to destroy Ukraine, is Ukrainian defenders. Ukrainian military, who every day risk and give their lives for their fellow citizens, are on the front line. Therefore, we continue to gather for Horn Group, reminding them of their address. I wish you good health. We are fighters of the 33rd HMB of the Horn Group Company. We ask you, Michael, and your subscribers to open a new collection for 1 million hryvnias, which will help us to buy equipment, repair damaged pickups. We are now performing tasks in the Donetsk direction. We have run out of necessary money for the collection, for the purchase of antennas, for the purchase of FPV drones, for the repair of automobiles. I will be very grateful to you from all my team. Glory to Ukraine, glory, glory. Here is the QR code for Monobank in the description. Monobank, PayPal, various cryptocurrencies, USDT, B2C, Ethereum. In general, support Ukrainian defenders in the way you can. This is important. This is the life saved by Ukrainian soldiers and civilians whom they defend. Well, we move on. Details continue to be received about the previous Ukrainian strikes. The roof of one of the workshops was damaged as a result of an attack on the Tambov powder plant on June 11. On the day of the attack, the plant completely stopped its work, Astra sources reported. As Astra reported on June 11, after the attack of the BPL, the Tambov powder plant caught fire in Kottovskaya or Kitovskaya. Astra managed to geolocate the video of eyewitnesses. Later, the Jewish governor of the Tambov region, Evgeny Pervashev, confirmed the attack on the city without pilots. Astra found out that at least one of the BPLs hit the plant. The roof of one of the workshops was damaged. The plant on June 11 stopped work. All employees were evacuated. It also became known that in the Kottovskaya-Tambovskaya region, after the drone strikes on the powder plant, they conducted a crosswalk to protect against enemies. As the head of the city, Alexei Plakotnikov, with a request to perform ritual to the local priest, turned to the citizens. He named the crosswalk to protect Kottovskaya from enemies. Also, Plakotnikov published a video on which an organized car column with a DPS car in the head drives on forest and asphalt roads, periodically stopping in different locations on Melbourne. Innovative anti-drone means. Let's see how the spoiler will work. It is unlikely very good. In addition, the BPLs hit the railway locomotive with fuel. According to Astra, on the night of June 6, the BPL attacked the railway station in the Zaporozhye region. This happened at the crossing of the Belmanka station in Verkhny Takmak, a few kilometers from the village of Zarya. In addition to the cistern cars, the train transported 19 platforms from Volnovakha to the annexed Crimea. 11 BPLs hit the cistern with fuel, after which the driver stopped the train. This was followed by numerous strikes on unmanned vehicles, which led to the burn of 6 cistern cars, 4 with gasoline and 2 with diesel. The fire managed to stop only at 13 o'clock in the afternoon. Subsequently, the Ukrainian channel Dnipro published satellite pictures of the railway track near the Verkhny Takmak in the Zaporozhye region, on which you can see the defeat of the railway line. On June 7, the Defense Force of South Ukraine declared the defeat of the locomotive. With a column of vehicles, the enemy's damage was 13 tanks and more than 100 unarmored automobile vehicles. The message was confirmed, so maybe that's it. In another successful strike on the occupied territory, the Defense Force struck a column of buses with soldiers of the Russian army during a parking lot on the outskirts of Makivka, the military publication says. The video of the consequences was published by the Telegram channel Supernova Plus. A column of 4 buses and 1 truck, commas, with Black Army numbers was struck at the moment it stopped on the bypass road on the outskirts of Makivka, according to the source. As a result of the strike, at least 20 Russian military men were injured, as well as a large number of wounded. On the video, however, only one body can be seen between the cars. The place of the strike was located 45 kilometers from the front line. To the southern Makivka, the distance from the battle impact, as well as the nature of the damage with numerous traces of small fragments, is similar to the consequences of the strike by the GMLRS M30A1 controlled missiles with a shrapnel combat unit. This version along with the fact of the strike on the column of Russian vehicles is partially confirmed by Russian propagandists, who on June 13 reported about the strikes of shrapnel missiles in the same area. The VKSRF suffered another loss. The Su-25 assault plane collapsed, either due to friendly fire of its own or due to the fact that Russian pilots are flying on crumbling beep older than themselves. For the first time, the death of the plane was reported in Z channels, and soon a video of an incident was filmed according to the geolocation of the War Ark project in the area of the occupied Soledar. At the last seconds of the video, a parachute is visible in the frame, which allows to assume that the pilot really survived. At first glance, it may seem that he was struck by rockets, which launch its propellers, but the Z channels and various experts agree that the Su-25 collapsed without enduring difficult maneuvers due to the fatigue of the design. These old planes are regularly driven on the launch of uncontrolled rockets, that is, they are actually used in the role of a flying hail. After launch, it is necessary to perform sharp maneuver evasions in order not to get hit by the Ukrainian PVO, apparently. These maneuvers over the day overloaded the view of the design, as a result of which the plane fell off the wing, and then, well, you yourself saw everything. In more detail about this version, the Twitter user Special Hersankat wrote the following: I consulted with an aviation specialist who has direct operational experience on the reasons for the loss of the Russian Su-25. The expert explained that the wing mount to the fuselage was destroyed due to a sharp maneuver with a high overload. Although the overload was within the limits of the aircraft's structural allowances, the likely reasons were micro cracks in one of the fastening joints that existed before the flight. These connections are usually not checked during regular technical service, so a breakdown could have been caused by a production or repair defect at the plant, or a previously unknown structural weakness that appeared under load. It should be noted that the military blogger fighter bomber close to the VKSRF does not so unambiguously list the accident but got tired of the design. Here's what he writes. Once again, I will highlight for the incomprehensible, the Z channel reports. Cause of the accident is clear. The cause of the destruction of the wing, the half of the wing for the dual of the fuselage. Here, as if everything is clear, what was the cause of the destruction will be determined by the commission, and this may be a shell of an anti-aircraft gun or a misfire shot from anything that can destroy the wing, an explosion of an anti-aircraft gun on the way out of the barrel, a drone, a cable, friendly fire, a helicopter mine, a rocket with an inertial part, tired of the destruction of metal, an explosive device, or a diversion, and another million reasons, writes fighter bomber. But you believe in drown for your own. Your version is the most correct, he says. In general, we will never know the whole truth, so let's just rejoice at the death of another flying coffin and move on. An activist died in the war in Ukraine who first raised the flag of Russia in Kerch and then told about corruption in the family of the head of the Crimea. About the death of the activist of the Crimean Spring and the former deputy of the city council of Kerch, Konstantin Yermanov, his mother Tatiana Yermanova reported to the agency. According to the woman, on Thursday, they called from the military unit and reported about the death of her son. When identified, the biomaterial of the mother, which she transmitted through the military command, was used, after which it was taken to Rostov-on-Don. Tatiana herself did not see the body of her son. She suggested that it could be returned as part of one of the bodies' exchange. Konstantin Yermanov is considered to have been missing for more than a year, added his mother. She does not know about the circumstances of his son's death. Yermanov became famous in 2014, and he became the organizer and participant of the first pro-Russian rallies in Kerch. In the spring of 2014, he raised the Russian flag on the building of the city administration. After the annexation of the peninsula, Yermanov criticized the Russian head of Crimea, Sergei Aksionov. He, in particular, told about the Moscow apartment of his mother-in-law Aksionova Lyudmila Dobrynya, on the purchase of which, according to Yermanov, would not have enough of her income and the income of her son-in-law. In 2021, Yermanov was deprived of his deputy's powers, and the reasons were inaccuracies in his own declaration. In March 2022, Yermanov was detained on the case of the protection and distribution of drugs in the deputy's apartment when looking for 99.2 grams of cannabis. The investigation confirmed that more of her tea was stored in a box from under the tea cabinet in the kitchen. She also stated that in her chest pocket, Yermanov's jacket was allegedly found in a container from the Kinder Surprise, where there was also a small bag of marijuana. A little more was found in the pocket of the coat. Yermanov himself said that drugs were dropped on him. The witness in the case was Yermanov's acquaintance, Alexander Vlasenko. In March 2023, Yermanov was sentenced to 11 years in the colony on the case of the protection and distribution of marijuana. The exact Date when Yermanov went to war is unknown. However, in May 2024, a photo appeared in his profile in V-Contact with a photo of him in a bulletproof vest. But what am I telling you about the story? It is about many things at once. Lovingly living in the Russian world, the traitor received it in all its glory. With the corruptors, the security forces, dismissals, the Russian world eventually sent him to die. What did he do? The punishment is indescribable, and it is not clear what exactly became the punishment here: death or a collision with reality, where the very Russian flag waved by Yermanov marked theft, injustice, and degradation. Well, here you decide for yourself. We go to the front line. Deep State tells that the USRF has advanced in Malinovka on the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk direction, aiming at Myrnograd from the east. Ukrainian military officer Stanislav Bunyatov talks about a threatening situation in the direction. In the Pokrovsk direction, he writes, the enemy accumulates reserves in the rear. Heavy equipment is not much. They are making a bet on infantry and motorcycles, he tells. EPLUP crews are becoming larger. They are hard to control our logistics. In the rear, the enemy opens many training schools, drone pilots. Control of the training program is strict. Now let's move to the Zaporozhye. There in the Zaporozhye direction, according to Deep State. Russians have advanced in Malinovka, of course, not in the same direction as in the Pokrovsk direction. It is known that in this part of the front, the Russians suffered losses even before the recent aggravation. The servicemen of the 4th Guard base recorded a pre-death video, but Sergei Alexandrovich and Kondrashov Igor Nikolaevich, who served in the 4th Guard base often 164-31, reported that the commandment of the unit sends the servicemen to combat missions, knowing that they will die. This video was recorded before sending to the task in the area of the settlement Malaya Takmachka in the Zaporozhye region. Sergei said that if he does not come into contact in 2 weeks, it is necessary to spread this video on the internet. He also emphasized that assault units are often sent to the kill. If we get there, then God willing, we will not get there, we will not get there. Just Russian units, Russian assault units, all this is sent to the kill, to death. No one thinks about anything. Nowhere. Igor also added that the command decided to send them to combat missions like meat. The group of guys consisted of 8 people. Igor's little daughter, who, on her address, asked to convey that she loves her, can't even walk there, they can't even walk there, we are hungry, she forces us to go to the quadric if we don't get there. If we don't get in touch for a week, then we are no longer there. The only thing I want to say is just to convey to my daughter that I love her very much. At the moment, it is known that Kondrashov Igor Nikolaevich died on May 19, 1925. Of the 8 soldiers sent to the task, only 2 remained alive. Both are in a serious condition. And if he really loved his daughter, he would not have left her. He would not have gone. He would have died for the interests of Putin. Do not make his mistakes. There are difficult situations in the Liman direction, which can be considered one of the main directions of the Russian summer offensive. This is what Stanislav Bunyatov tells about the situation. The Liman direction is not happy with optimistic forecasts. In the area of Torsk and Zerchny, the Russians have regularly begun to capture our positions in the rear. This shows that the defense line does not have a clear border, and the positions feel a sharp shortage of infantry and air reconnaissance, Bunyatov notes. As for the Russian capabilities, the loss of technical supplies in the Russian warehouses, which I talked about in recent video, is entering a critical phase. Researcher Jump, studying satellite images of the 1311th base of the reserve of equipment and sites of the Omsk Transmash factory, comes to the conclusion that there are only 198 tanks T-80 of various modifications left in the location of Russia, most likely in a poor state. By autumn, Jump says they will end completely, and then it is not clear what the Omsk Transmash will actually work with, the main product of which is the modernized T-80 BVR. The plan to restore the production of T-80, which was announced a couple of years ago, apparently remained on paper. It is even more important that now the T-80 and its modifications, apparently, take an important place in the remaining Russian tank park. According to researcher Richard Weiricher, in the 25th year, about 50% of all the losses of Russian tanks, or rather those tanks which were not so difficult to determine, were completely impossible. Either way, in the fall, the replenishment of these losses will not be foreseen. That is, the armor tank component of the Russian army will weaken further, which will lead to even more significant losses to infantry and the stop of assaults. With an elementary barbed wire, including to overcome which the tanks came up with 100 years ago. Another story from the rubric, Don't Try to Leave the Russian Army in Legal Ways. In April, Anna Zanina, a wife in the case of the 228th Guard Field Regiment, Zanina Denis, said that for a long time she was trying to get her husband fired due to family circumstances, but all her appeals were ignored by various agencies. At the moment, the situation has not changed. The woman's appeal remains unanswered. During his service, we had a Common child the fourth, unfortunately, with a pathology to which we have already done one operation, there are still several operations as the child grows up. All kinds of agencies appealed for help since I need help from my husband in raising children. I cannot cope with them alone, since with this pathology children are disabled. I am trying to fire my husband. On May 3, he wrote a dismissal report on which there is still no answer, and at the moment he is sent to the 3rd Battalion prison. After the injury, Denis was given a 30-day vacation and was assigned to the category of G dignity. After that, he had to go through a military doctorate commission, but then he was not allowed to do so and was sent back to the SVO zone. Anna pointed out that after Denis wrote the dismissal report on May 3, 25, the regiment decided to transfer her husband to the 428th Firing Regiment, but he was sent back there despite the fact that it had already been a month and a half. The report was not reviewed. It is important to note Alina has general confidence despite this, but her appeal does not respond anywhere. And in April, the leading consultant of the Department for the Protection of the Rights of the Child of the apparatus and full-fledged human rights in the Persian territory, Maslakova area in general, suggested to Sergeyevna to consider the option of a temporary room for children in a social institution instead of the appropriate help. If you had little of this story to decide never to go to the Russian army, then here is another one about how Russian military bureaucracy literally kills people. Today is exactly 40 days since my father died, and I want to tell your story about how the system broke down a person. The girl reports that her father, Anisimov Vitaly Nikolaevich, born in 1982, suffered from severe chronic diseases, including internal bleeding of the stomach, which prevented the possibility of serving in the army. However, he was mobilized. During training, Vitaly seriously injured his legs, lost the opportunity to walk, but despite this, he was still sent to the SVO zone. Get a vacation, however, on the way back to the... According to her words, only 2 years later, her father managed to combat zone. Vitaly's stomach started to bleed in the airport. Vitaly began to abuse alcohol and attempted suicide, after which he was sent to treatment in a psychiatric hospital where he spent 3 months. 5 months later, after the passing of the Military Medical Commission, he died of lung cancer and sepsis. Daughter hopes that competent authorities will be held accountable for the death of her father and restore justice. But as you understand, this will of course not happen. The topic of Russian soldiers who were lucky enough to survive turns out to be civilians who are not needed in the first place by the state which sent them to death. I talked about this in a separate video, but here's another example. Vladimir Shapashnikov went to the combat zone, where when performing a combat task, he blew up on a mine and lost his leg. Having returned home, Vladimir filed a statement to the military commissary. Receiving a pension for the injury, however, the military commissary ignores the statement from the War Action magazine, where it is said that Vladimir received his injury while performing a combat task and identifies his disability as an everyday injury, which deprives him of all proper benefits, payments, and a right to military pension. I come to the Pervomaisk military commissary. A girl comes out there, a representative, and says, "Here we give you this paper here, a refusal to receive a pension for the injury. You are considered not an injury and a failure." When I came across, it turned out that a failure is not a combat injury. And here they drive us from cabinet to cabinet. The co-servant of Vladimir said that he had been treated and recovered for a long time. He also noted that Vladimir's case was not unique. There are many such guys, and most likely everyone who has received Such injuries, defending their interests, being in the military formation, and considering such injuries as non-combat, but it must be. Embarrassing to say this, probably I will not say anything. Vladimir appealed to the prosecutor's office of the Pervomaysk district, but the reaction did not follow. And the most interesting thing is that no one reacts. I have no pity for him or his co-servants. This is just an important example and a reminder of what will happen to you and how you will be thrown away as soon as you need the help of the state. Do not go to the Russian army. If you get there, desert, this is a place where you become a killer and you also become a corpse or such a person who will eventually become a burden for his relatives and will lead something in life at some point. In the meantime, the victims of the veterans continue to bury Slavs in the dumps. The resident of the village of Solnechny, the mother of the deceased soldier, showed in what condition the cemetery is located, where the dead members of the Soviet Union are buried. Son Yulia was killed in March, but his body has not been returned home yet. As soon as my child is taken out of there and brought home, I just have nowhere to bury him. The state of this place and the fact that no one brings him to order is just some kind of mockery of the heroes. I will not bury my child here. The relatives have already repeatedly appealed to the administration asking to put things in order in the cemetery, but in response they only heard that they needed to wait. The widow of the deceased Alexander Mursanov, getting to the grave, strongly bent her leg. Woman said that if she knew in what condition the cemetery was located, she would never bury her husband here. Since March, we have been fighting to put things in order here for the parents' day, but no one even brings out the garbage. We appeal to the administration of the village and the prosecutor's office of Solnechny district. At one of the meetings, we were told to wait and that they would do something here someday, but of course they did not. Therefore, there is no rest for Russian soldiers in life, neither after their death nor for their relatives do not become part of this process. Michael Nacke was with you and see you soon. All the best, bye.